Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?
Welcome, everybody, to another live stream edition of Liberty Lockdown. I don't do them live very often anymore because I've been doing solo shows so much, but this story was so compelling, I felt it probably ought to be live. So without further ado, let me tell you just a quick backdrop. I read this story in the Daily Wire. I immediately invited this gentleman on the show. His name is Harrison Tinsley. He is fighting for custody of his son, who is being raised at 3 years old as non-binary. And that is, needless to say, concerning. Harrison, welcome aboard.
What's up? How's it going?
I'm all right. Concerned about this story, though. And I think a lot of people are worried about this trajectory where we're starting to kind of get so woo-woo when it comes to gender and sexual orientation that people are kind of losing their minds a little bit. So I thought that your story would definitely be interesting, but more importantly than that, I think that it's probably important that the public knows about what's happening. So hopefully you can get a little bit of support here. So I've spoken enough. Go ahead and tell us first off where you're from, kind of some of the backstory. I'd appreciate it.
Well, my name is Harrison Tinsley. I'm from Los Gatos, California. It's right in between San Jose and Santa Cruz. I spent a lot of time in Lake Tahoe as an adult. Most of my time has been there. And yeah, it's very concerning. And unfortunately, it's happening more and more all over the country. And the courts, basically, there's no law on it yet where courts can really rule about something like gender, at least not to my knowledge.
How did it used to work? This seems like a totally new phenomenon where you have children that are, I thought that we would put sex on a birth certificate when a child was born. Is that not the way anymore?
If I believe they're starting to not do that, but in my case, luckily, it does say that he's male on his birth certificate.
Okay.
So that's good.
Yeah. Because it seems like if that's what the birth certificate says, then there ought to be some sort of method for you to be able to compel he be raised in that fashion. But it's a very complicated issue, particularly given where you live. So you're in Northern California, right?
Correct. Yeah, the Bay Area.
Okay. And were you married to this woman?
No, she was my girlfriend at the time.
Okay.
When she actually got pregnant, we were both happy. It was totally positive thing, but unfortunately, it didn't stay that way.
And based off the article, it said that you actually were left out of the picture just before his birth. Is that correct?
It was more like halfway through her pregnancy.
Okay.
Till his birth.
And so what happened there?
Well, essentially, she broke up with me. She said we had to go to counseling. I made a counseling appointment. She said she bailed on going to it. I made a second one. She bailed again. And then after that second time, I received a letter from her attorney and it looked like an attorney letter. It was like super weirdly worded, all sophisticated. And it just asked me not to talk to her or her family, anyone in my family. It was like a cease and desist kind of thing. So then I was left out until his birth, which I didn't find out he was born until about a week after from one of her friends. And then I was like, wow, this is, heartbreaking. It's a weird thing to even fathom. Like my son was born and I wasn't there.
Right.
And so I figured out kind of what to do and what resources I had. And 2 months later, he was born in December. In February, I filed in court for like a established paternity custody visitation sort of thing. And it took 13 months after I filed in court. So I actually didn't meet my son until he was 15 months old. And I was aware the whole time, like I said, we were together when she was pregnant. So it was pretty tragic. But fortunately now I have half custody and me and him have a really, really great relationship.
Okay. So you do have half custody.
Yeah.
So you have to live within a few miles, but do you have a restraining order against one another?
So I was court ordered just to move to the Bay Area broadly. And so I moved here in a nice town where I'm from. And his mom lives in San Francisco. And there's currently no restraining orders, but I did have one on her for a period of time.
Can you get into a little bit of that? Would you mind? I don't know if it's too personal, but.
Well, what would you like to know?
To get a restraining order against the mother of your child, she obviously also went the other direction and she basically tried to cut you out of your son's life. So there's some animosity here. I'm just trying to give the audience the full picture so that they can kind of evaluate for themselves what's transpired.
Okay. Well, basically, the restraining order was mostly based on defamation of me and harassment on social media. Um, she would post things about me that aren't true on social media really
Yeah.
often. I tried to include on it, putting dresses and makeup on my son as like the court denied to add that to the restraining order, but I did try to include it.
And to
But they did,
clarify for the audience, your
yeah,
son's 3, right?
yeah, he's 3 and 5 months right now.
In what world would someone even have the capacity to assess someone's non-binary status at that age? It seems crazy, if I'm being honest.
So it is crazy, Clint. I mean, first of all, my son Sawyer is amazing. He's 100% a boy. He fully feels like he's a boy. He very strongly acts that way, talks that way. If you mention anything to the contrary to him, he'll yell at you. It makes him upset. I mean, if you want to hear like, I don't know what would bring people to do this other than their own self interest of getting maybe on like a higher victimhood status hierarchy thing.
Yeah.
And because it in no world, even if you genuinely thought that, it's like that doesn't give them a better life. It doesn't make any sense. But I think it's something we need to stop for sure. I think it's something we should make illegal. But like in his case, as an example, besides dresses and whatever, and that stuff upsets him, right? Because he talks to me. We're as close as can be. When I have him 3 or 4 days a week. I don't work those days. I spend every single second with him. I missed 15 months. I'm not going to miss one more second. It's not
Love that.
happening. Yeah, thank you. Me too. It's 100% worth all the sacrifice that comes with it. He told me a story one time, Clint. He's like, Dada, and I know when he like want what your son so well, like when he's talking to you, like what the situation is. Like, is he telling you something silly, something serious, right? He told me one time she had taken him to Disneyland. This was like, I don't know, it was within the last year, but it was a few months after he told me. He said, "Oh, Dada, when mommy took me to Disneyland, I couldn't go on the rides unless I wore my princess shoes." And I was like, "What?" So it's like that's like coercion, and that's just something. Assuming what my son's saying is true, which I believe it is that's just I can't even imagine. Like you said that before, but like you can't. But not only pushing it on them, but like you can't. You took you all the way to Disneyland, and you can't go on a ride unless you do this specific thing that you do not want to do. That hurts your feelings. Like it's heartbreaking.
It's hard to imagine, honestly. Like it just seems so strange. Did she ever explain to you her rationale for why she believed that your son was not a boy?
The only thing I've heard her say is just like we can't choose that for him or something
Oh, okay.
like
So
something like that.
she's trying to raise him without an
But
assigned
but she did treat him as a boy
gender.
for the first like year and a half, and then it randomly started happening.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So do you have any intuition as to why that shift occurred?
I have one theory. I don't know why. She started identifying that way herself. So
Ah, okay.
so that I think that's probably a big part of it.
Is
Um,
she transitioning?
I don't know. I don't believe so, but I have no idea what she does.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, she could just be non-binary and not be
Right.
transitioning because she's just not identifying with either. Who knows? But
That's
I
what I
just
think
thought,
it is. But yeah, I
okay,
don't know for certain.
yeah, it's interesting. So, um, you said that your son, fights back when there's any sort of assertion that he's not a boy.
Yeah.
Does does he do the same with her, as far as you know? And if so, how is she able to put makeup on him and put him in dresses and things like that?
It sounds like from talking to him that recently it hasn't been happening because he does fight back.
Okay.
But I do know he stands up to her at least somewhat because one time on the court app, I got lengthy messages about how there was like a altercation with him and her about that sort of thing. And she was blaming me and calling me a bigot and all the words you can imagine. Um, so I'm pretty sure it's legit, and he does stand up to her, and I always tell him, you should be happy with who you are. And if someone tells you something that you don't agree with, you can tell them no.
Well, that's good parenting advice. It just makes it very challenging when the other parent in his life is saying something to the contrary, and I don't know how you bridge that gap. Was there any signs of this during your dating with her that like this was ever a possibility? Because it seems
Yeah.
I don't know how you could ever suspect such a thing to be in your future.
There was. I mean, if you remember the Daily Wire article, they didn't post the picture, but there was a one Facebook post. I think it was the first time she announced that she was pregnant. Um, it was just something like "Baby Sawyer due in December," like whether you're a boy or a girl or neither, I'm gonna love you no matter what, something like that.
Uh,
And then there was also personal conversations between me and her where she would ask about it. You know,
right. And is the I mean, just to give a little bit of my backstory, I'm from San Diego, product of a twice divorced family. I know the court system favors the woman in the relationship all the time. Has that been your experience as well?
so if you want a liberal policy that I agree with, actually, California's relatively fair to dads. Like they're not. Of course, girls still have the upper edge.
Right. But it's not as bad as it could be.
It's not as bad as it could be. Like I've talked to people from South Carolina and other places, and I think they're a lot stricter in that regard, giving it to the
Mhm.
mother. However, still in California, of course, the girls have the upper hand. I mean, like I said, it took 13 months in court, not till he was 15 months old, just for me to meet him. And I would say if I had done any of the things that I proved in court that she did, like I feel like one or two of the many that I proved, believe I would have lost custody or significantly had less
Right.
custody. I
Yeah.
do believe
Not
dads are
exactly an even playing field still.
not at all. Like and 27% of dads, this is something I wanted to get into. Like 27% of dads don't even see their kids. Those aren't all dads that like ran away. People hear that story or that narrative. I'm not sure how much I even buy that narrative anymore. I'm sure it happens and that's tragic and it's horrible. And I can't imagine how anyone would do that. But I mean, the court system, what happens? People get divorced and then the guy perhaps loses all of his money and doesn't get to see his kids anymore. Maybe he sees them like once a week or something like that, and he gets to like FaceTime them. It's like he's their uncle or something, and just that's like what happens. It should be a lot more fair for dads. That's something we need to fight for, I think, as well as protecting children.
I couldn't agree more. I won't go too much into it personally, but I had a sibling in my life that long, decades long custody battle, um, and it was horrific. It was absolutely horrific to witness, and the damage is permanent, unfortunately. To everybody involved, but particularly the child. And it's just heartbreaking that um, it's messy regardless when you go through a divorce, but then if you have a court system that ultimately favors somebody over the other just based off of gender, which is ironic given the situation where
Yeah,
you're in a battle over gender once again. um, it's just very unfair. And I mean, just to give an example of it, like put the shoe on the other foot. She gives birth, you take away your son for the next 18 months and you don't allow her to see him, you'd be in jail. It'd be
100%.
kidnapping. But for whatever reason, I mean, what was the justification for the incredible delay in being able to even meet your boy?
Um, from who? The court or her
Yeah,
or
well, I mean, sure, I assume she didn't want to because she just didn't want you to be in his life. But maybe there's something more complex.
yeah, it was that essentially, and some false allegations mixed in with just COVID made everything take longer, and she also
uh
used that as a way to try to make it take longer or say it can't happen because of COVID, this or that,
okay.
and the
But
court went along with that for the most part.
I mean, it seems as if you would have to make a really serious accusation and have evidence to be able to withhold a father from meeting their son for a year and a half. Is there more to this story that I should be asking about, or is it just as simple as that? That she just asserted it and there was nothing else there.
I really think in this particular instance, like COVID had a lot to do with it,
Mm.
as well. She asserted some things, yeah, but that didn't even come to court until we ended up having a hearing, really. And I mean,
So you didn't even get a hearing for over a year.
yeah, it was just negotiation between attorneys, and
Wow.
thank God I actually got a pro bono attorney at the time, and that was just unbelievable that he was able to help me.
So what has I mean, just for my audience's sake, go a little bit more into detail as to what the courts have said. Um, did you present to them the issue of her raising him in a non-binary fashion, and how did the judge respond, or did they refuse to address it entirely, or what's the court system doing with these types of issues at this point?
So regarding that, I did bring it up. It was not one of our main points. We have higher safety concerns that we were presenting to the court than that. But in that particular thing, the court essentially just ruled they don't have the right to rule on that. And that was it.
Do you think that that's just California law, or is that nationwide? Do you have? You probably don't even know, but just curious.
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, you hear horror stories, right? Like the guy in Texas, Jeff Younger,
Right.
right? And they actually are ruling like into transitioning to kids, and that was Texas and now California. So apparently it's possible, but in this particular instance, that he's young, he hasn't expressed any of that. I'm not sure what the court thinks.
Well, it is a really complicated issue. As someone who, doesn't trust the court system and doesn't really trust the cops, if I'm being honest, I don't really want to get the courts involved if like a mom wants to put her son in a dress, but at the same time, to ignore the fact that that could be damaging and likely is a stretch too. So like I don't know what the answer is here.
Well, I think that'd be like the libertarian argument is that you don't really want the government involved. But I think this is a perfect example where the government has to do something. The government's base job is to like protect the citizens, right? And I would say all of our job, including them, would be to protect kids the most. They're the most wonderful, innocent things that deserve the most protection. That's why this matters so much to me. Not even just my son, but everyone.
Of course. No, I agree with that entirely. My point is, say it's not a separated household.
Sure.
Sorry. Say it's all right, we're back. Say it's a couple that's in San Francisco or whatever, and they want to raise their kids this way. Is it like, would it be better to have them removed from the home? These are really like next level precautions to take, that I'm not sure putting a child into the system would be a net benefit to them over them being raised in a very non-traditional fashion. That's where I get concerned, because if you have any experience with CPS or like
Right.
the homes that they put these kids in, it's like those aren't happy futures either. So that's really my concern with having the justice system or the cops get involved. It's like I wish, I mean, obviously you're going to have issues where there's a divorce and sometimes the parent is genuinely mentally ill and a danger to their child, in which case, yes, I think that the state does have a role in protecting the child. It's just in this particular instance where it's like, I'm just going to put them in clothes that they don't want. It's like, well, I don't know. I just don't know.
Well, I'd push back a little. I mean, we could look at Washington right now, right? And they just passed a law, if I'm not mistaken, that if you don't affirm your child's fake gender, that
That's true.
CPS can literally take the kid from you. So
Well,
I don't.
well, that's obviously insane.
Of course, yeah. The fact that passed in a real state in America is mind blowing. But if that's the law, I mean, I personally believe that there's no reason why we shouldn't have the government or CPS or whoever involved if you're forcing something like gender ideology onto a kid. Because, I mean, let's just look at kids that do that sort of thing. The suicide rate is unbelievable, and most of them, I'm not sure. I guess if we're specifically speaking on like actually transitioning them versus like non-binary, but let's say you're actually transitioning them. I mean, most
Oh,
kids.
no, I oppose that entirely. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I mean, most people do, even the Democrats I know. But like when kids do that, they grow out of it up to 94% of the time. It depends on the study. Some say 80, some say the most recent one on boys was an 88%. These kids are most likely to grow out of it. So why would we like push something through that they're going to grow out of? And
I agree. I mean, particularly with, any sort of, medicine or surgeries, God, no. I mean, any of those things I think are obviously areas where the state has a responsibility to be involved. Obviously, I would prefer that it not be an issue at all. But if you have a parent who's dead set on doing such a thing, or in many cases, teacher that's advising these children down this path, I think that is all honestly, it's criminal behavior in my estimation, but um, it's just such a new phenomenon that it's like I don't feel like we have any laws on the books to actually address this type of situation. When in talking to your attorneys, did they give you guidance as to how this might be handled? Or was it just like, let's just get 50-50 custody and that's the best we can hope for? Or what did they
Well,
say?
no, I mean that's how it started, but my attorney now, as it was actually the first ever attorney I had pro bono. Now I pay him, but originally I got him. He chose my case. He didn't have to. It was like a state or city program. I'm not sure exactly, but I qualified for it. He chose my case, thankfully, and helped me out.
Yeah,
I
thank
mean,
goodness for that guy.
it was something, he's like, look, we're in San Francisco. That's not something we're going to focus on. So we do mention it, um, but it's not, again, the biggest thing. And as far as I know, he was talking to me about the appeal that we're doing because right now there was a trial, 5 days, with witnesses, everything. And then there was a decision 2 months later that just kept custody 50-50, basically. So nothing changed, essentially.
Were you going for full custody
Yeah.
and vice versa? Was she as well?
She might have asked for like majority or something. She wasn't really going for full custody. I
Oh,
don't
interesting.
believe it was more me going for that.
Okay. I was
Yeah.
just curious. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem is that your attorney did the right thing, but ultimately we need like I forget what the word is, but case law that is on the books that gives other fathers or mothers, for that matter, in this situation, an opportunity or a pathway to actually protecting their child. Because it is, if you have an abusive parent, obviously you can get CPS involved and the cops and everything else. But if it's not abuse because it's verbal and it's putting them in clothes that they don't want or putting makeup on them, it's like, man, that is such a gray area that is really complicated. And I don't trust the court system to be able to handle it well. At least that's my concern. But I'm 100% on board with you in terms of banning any sort of permanent uh, alterations to the child's chemistry, like biological makeup or their brain chemistry or anything like that. I think that's totally insane to do that to a kid. But the middle ground is the area that I find the most challenging in terms of like how you actually address that safely. Um, anyways, what is your son on good terms with her? It's like it would seem to me like that would probably rub him the wrong way after a while.
I mean, I'm sure it upsets him, but I imagine they have good times together still. You
Okay,
know, maybe
good.
it's ups and downs, but I don't particularly know what happens, but hopefully there's love in there also.
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
there is. Are you able to? Are you on good enough terms with her to have extended conversations to actually see how you guys might be able to work through this, or is this kind of just like battle lines have been drawn and you're both in your own separate corners?
We can talk a little bit about some things, but I would say for this, it's more like battle lines are drawn.
Yeah,
And I mean, yeah, like you said, these things are irreversible, the surgeries and hormones, right?
yeah,
And as far as I know, you're mentioning case law. As far as I know, there's no case law established yet. Otherwise, we would have brought that up.
right.
But so my case could be one where they in the appeals court or wherever it goes, there where they could establish some law, perhaps, because I think we really need it.
Yeah. Well, what law would you like to see? I mean, since I'm struggling so hard with it, you've had a lot more time to think about this than I have. So, what do you think would be the best formulation to actually prevent the next situation like this?
That you cannot change a kid's gender unless they're 18.
So, but I'm saying, oh, so you're just saying in terms of like physically, or do you mean in clothing, everything?
I mean, it's tough to want to draw the line that you can tell someone what to wear, right?
Oh, that's what I
So
was bringing up. Yeah,
right. So it's tough. I mean, if it was up to me just totally right now, I'd be on board with just getting rid of all of it entirely because I would think that would be more of a net good than net bad. But I could see the argument like if someone wants to wear certain clothes and that's all it is, that they should probably be allowed to do that.
yeah. I think it is an interesting. I mean, that's the part of it that I was struggling with. Is like, yeah, I really don't want the state to tell a parent what they have to dress their kids in, but it's like I think it's kind of undeniable that if you dress your boy in something he doesn't want to wear and you call him a name he doesn't want to hear, and you do that for years on end, uh, there's no doubt that there's going to be issues that stem from that. And it's just such a brutal such a brutal gray area where like I simply don't know how to handle that. And it doesn't sound as if she's attempting to, use any sort of medications on him, right?
I haven't heard of anything like that. And to your point about, like the gray area, I mean, like we already all agree that the government can force parents to do some things. You have to literally feed your kid or house your kid,
Sure.
or they will get taken from you.
Right.
So it's not out of this world to say that we can make parents do things that are best for the kids.
Right.
So I do think there's an argument to be made that we could make it illegal for parents to do this to their children.
Well, it ain't going to happen in California, I can tell you that. But but I could see it happening in some other conservative. I could see, honestly, I'm in Florida right now. I could see DeSantis passing a bill like that, just given these types of horror stories. Have you been in contact with that other father? You mentioned his name earlier, the one in Texas.
Jeff Younger. He said he was going to call me. I haven't heard back yet. I'm waiting on it. But I've been in contact with a lot of different fathers going through similar things.
Okay. Well, let's get. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, so you were saying like other states, like I believe it's 19 states now have passed laws stopping, gender transition of children, puberty blockers, and surgery, sex change surgery.
Right.
19, I believe, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunately necessary because this is an increasing trend. So bizarre, I don't know what age you are, but I just turned 40, and it's like I just can't even believe that this is a discussion I'm having where it's like, no, we should be giving, kids life-changing drugs. But I guess if you look in hindsight and you see how many kids were put on psychotropic medications, even my generation, putting everybody on Ritalin and antidepressants at younger and younger ages, it's like this is kind of the natural progression of feeling as if we can basically medicate any ailment away. And it's like just so obviously false. But this trend should have been pushed back against a long time ago, in my opinion. What do you think?
I totally agree with you, and I do think kids are way over medicated for sure. But and what you just said at the end, I think you're right. It should have this, should have that. But to be honest with you, now's the time.
Of course.
I think we have all this momentum. People are finally seeing it, how common it is, how much it's happening. I'm ready to stand up for it. We're at like a moment in history where it's like we're gonna either stop it now. We're gonna either be looked back upon as cowards or people that protected children. And I want to be looked back upon as someone who protected children. I'm all in on it. I think we need to do it regardless.
Yeah, no, that's reasonable, man. And particularly given your situation, I can understand, taking a hardline stance on it. And generally, I'm with you. I think that this is a trend that is going to leave carnage in its wake. You're going to have a lot of kids that when they become young adults and, even get up into my age, it's like they're going to be irreparably damaged by this very narrow period of our history as a people. And it's really sad because, it's the adults in their lives that are guiding them down these paths. And that's just so contrary to how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to have people that give you sound advice and make you embrace and love yourself as you are, how you were born. And it's just, that's not the message of today that many, many, many millions of kids are receiving, is that, if you feel at all uncomfortable with your body, well, perhaps it's the wrong body. Like that is, to me, it's a particularly unique evil because it masks itself in one of love and compassion and acceptance. But in truth, what it's teaching the child is to not love or be compassionate for themselves. And I think that's really heartbreaking.
It is really heartbreaking. I mean, that's the one thing you would want to do more than anything is have someone be happy with who they are. And even the left actually preaches that, right? So
exactly.
It's very interesting. And to be honest, everyone's confused or feels weird in their body in puberty, right? That's a normal.
I sure did.
Human thing. Yeah, me too. And it's like there's no other illness where we give into this, right? Like if your daughter's anorexic, you don't let her not eat dinner.
No, you have to support her in her refusal to eat. It's
Right.
like, so
That's
what are
not
we talking about?
right. We would never do that. Same if they're schizophrenic, you don't like go along like, oh, I hear the voices too. Or if someone has like this
Oh man.
dysphoria of limbs, if
Right.
doctors can't cut your hand off when you're like, no, I'm sure I feel like it's not there, they're gonna be like, no, I can't do that. Well, how is a young boy's penis or young girl's breast any different than that? I genuinely see no difference.
Yeah.
And doctors are happy to do that.
Well, imagine if how crazy a schizophrenic person would be if you started telling them, yes, I hear those voices too, and yes, we should do whatever the voices say. It's like, man, it's really dark, and
Right.
I, I don't know, I don't know how. I honestly don't understand how this ideology has taken hold in such a broad way, other than to say that far too few people that held on to any sort of rational thought stayed silent for far too long, and kind of the crazies are running the insane
Yeah.
asylum, or however the saying goes.
All it takes for like evil to win is good men to do nothing, right? And that's what's been
Yeah.
happening. People are too scared to speak up. Like I said earlier, even all the Democrats I know, they're all against this stuff. I don't
Right.
like everyone thinks this is totally insane, and yet we're just letting it happen. It's just a lack of courage. We need more courage, and we need to stop it.
Yeah. Well, I think that social media certainly plays a role. As you said, she was posting that online. When she first found out she was pregnant, there's a lot of like in-group signaling and virtue signaling that goes along with child rearing, and I can't even begin to express how disappointing that is. Like that
Yeah.
your child is an accessory to your lifestyle, as opposed to being your pride and joy, the focus of why you exist on this earth. It's just so um it's so backwards and so sick. And I think that this is obviously, I'm not referencing the mother of your child in particular. This is a broad issue where there's a lot of people that are no longer focused on being a parent for the sake of like just love, and that's what you're there to do. And it's more kind of a social status almost. It's weird. Have you seen that trend
Exactly.
too, or am I
Oh,
just
totally. No,
hallucinating it?
that's exactly what it is. I
Okay.
mean, people are like virtue signaling so that they look cool or whatever. They have people comment on their social media, "You're so brave and wonderful
Right.
because you're having your kid be non-binary." And the reality is that's selfish and that's demented and it's not okay.
Yeah. Well, and then you have some, under 18-year-olds that have actually had surgeries. And
Right?
um, fortunately, it's not an astronomical figure, but it is significant. And I just, for the life of me, I don't know how these doctors are going along with it. I don't know how it's not illegal, to be honest. Like it just, to me, it like if you were doing augmentation on a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old, you'd be like, you go to prison.
I know.
Why the fuck is this happening? Um,
It shouldn't be any different.
yeah, it's really mystifying to me. But on the inverse of this, just to steel man the other side's argument, is that they say, suicide rates are extraordinarily high, and you have to basically assist these kids however they deem fit. Uh, as you know as well as I do, it post surgery and post medicine, you still have an astronomically high, suicide or suicidal ideation rate. So at that point, I think it just comes down to like, what studies do you believe? And
Correct.
unfortunately, we can't even agree on that. If you just lived through the last 3 years, you know damn well scientific studies are now partisan in nature too.
Yep.
How do we bridge this gap, man? Do you have any ideas beyond, taking over your local political office and doing something like that?
Well, regarding the suicide thing, I mean, these doctors or psychologists, they use it as blackmail to the parents, like, oh, you have to do this. Like, would you rather have a dead son or a transgender daughter
Right,
or
right.
whichever way they say it? And that's insane, first of all. And if that was true, then we could look at history, like, where's before this happened, just like what, 10 years ago and all the way back? Where's all this skyrocketing suicide of kids? No, it's now. Now there's the most suicide kids have ever had. And
Yep.
there's recent studies out of Europe, I believe, that showed a slight increase in suicide after transitioning. You see all these detransitioners, Chloe Cole, who's amazing, or whoever, and they're so unbelievably brave. I What we need to do is we make it illegal and we say no more. You're not going to abuse kids. It's not happening.
Yeah. Well, I just think, unfortunately, the odds of that occurring in the blue strongholds, New York, California, handful of others, obviously Oregon and Washington.
Right.
Jesus Christ. Um, I think that ultimately your only option is to get out of those states, which is what I did. I fled to Florida because I
Nice.
couldn't handle the lockdowns, but I had no idea that this type of stuff was even a possibility. And it makes me feel much happier that I got out of there. Obviously, given your co-parenting status, you're not able to leave. Are you going to look into some sort of political activism to try and make a legal change moving forward?
I'm totally game for being involved in the process of getting laws changed or testifying to the government or anything it takes.
Yeah,
Considering starting like a nonprofit to fight this sort of thing, I'm all in, like I said, on protecting kids. I think this is the most important issue. I care about a lot of issues,
right.
First, Second Amendment, all these things, but that is the number one to me because it's just denying basic reality. Like if we don't have that, we don't have anything else. It's just they're literally trying to tell us to not believe our own eyes. It's like 1984 or something. It's wild.
Yeah, it's 1984 in a lot of ways, friend. I mean,
Yeah.
including the fact that everything I do is being recorded by the government. Yeah, I'm
How many
very
FBI guys are watching us right now, do you think?
plenty. I mean, at least two because I've had them on the show. Hi, Kyle. Yeah, but they're actually heroes. They're whistleblowers, so I'm
Nice.
they're some of the good ones. Yeah, man, I really am concerned about the trajectory. Like I just think that we don't even have the manifesto from the trans Tennessee
Right.
school or school slash religious school shooter. And I have a feeling that, what, what that manifesto consisted of may have been some of our worst fears as to, how this type of rearing, what it does to someone's psyche. And I just really feel like it's a ticking time bomb. Like you're raising a bunch of some of these people undoubtedly will go on to live happy lives, and God bless them.
Yep.
I'm not trying to make this a truly like us versus them type of thing. I don't feel that way at all. But I am very nervous about those that are put on this path, and it is not in alignment with their own internal belief system and their own preferences, like their own genuine preferences, because they're being manipulated because they're children. you know, uh, the outcome from that in terms of self harm or projecting that harm against civilization is a real deep fear of mine, honestly. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I think there's reason for concern.
It's terrifying. I mean, you've seen there's been what 4 or 5 non-binary slash transgender school shooters or
I
some
don't know if it was in school, but yeah, something like that.
shootings
Yeah.
that got attention. It's crazy. I mean, that proves that they're not mentally right in the head on its face. And then beyond that, it's like, what medications are they taking?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, we're over taking medication. And the third thing that we brought up way earlier is, do they have a dad? I've read, I don't know that this is a fact, but that a lot of these school shooters don't have dads. And when you look, it's something I really think we need to work on again as a country, because
Agreed.
single mothers run these households like 82% of the time. I think dads win custody 18%. And when you look at the stats, it's like homeless, drug addicted, prison, suicide, all these things, vast majority, like 70, 80% will be single mother households. And then when you look at single dads, believe it or not, they're right on par with the success rate of a 2-parent mom and dad household. So
yeah, no, I know the trend line is absolutely horrible if you don't have both parents, a mother and father.
right,
But yeah, the fathers are usually the one that if there is going to be a missing parent, it's probably the father. And I
right.
think the consequences of that are, empirically detrimental. Like it's just provable that
But we're
that's very
incentivizing it, right? Like
yes.
why yeah, you agree. So why do you think we have the single mom dad problem?
Yeah, well, I mean, many people, including myself, would point to the welfare state and the fact that you basically incentivize people to separate so that they can get additional financial assistance for not having a father to care
Right,
for the kids. It's an interesting quandary because it's like obviously there are situations where the father is a deadbeat and he runs away, and then the mother's like starving or barely able to keep the kids fed.
right,
But I think that if you make that a top down solution, where you have the state just go like, oh, you have 5 kids, you get $2,500, you get $500 per kid or whatever. I don't know how it works.
Right.
I don't know the dollar amount, I should say. I think that is clearly just puts an incentive structure in place that's really detrimental, where you're going to start to see people that are having kids for the purposes of just getting additional money and also pushing the father away to make sure that that gravy train stays a coming. And it's
Right.
like that is just awful and borderline evil, if I'm being honest. But it's I'm sure there's other reasons that it's happened in terms of just community. But my personal fix would be that I think that really we were way better off when, if a mother was left in that sort of position, the church would intervene, because the church is actually able to study the situation intimately and say like, okay, yeah, the father is actually gone. Like
Right.
now we're going to lend financial assistance to you. Um, if it's not the case where she's like just kicking an otherwise loving father out of the house to get additional money, the church would be like, well, we're not going to support that. So I
Right.
think that's it. It requires some sort of judgment, and the state's just not good at that.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you one, I'm totally on board with like food stamps or whichever different terms they have for it now. I think that's a great one to have for single parents. But as far as all this like child support and alimony and just ridiculous numbers, completely biased again, helping the mothers, or I think that's just getting out of hand, and that's incentivizing people. I think we need to start rewarding or incentivizing two-parent households. I think that could help a lot. They
Well,
get a tax break or
yeah.
whatever they get.
I
Um,
I can't get on board with that because
why?
because I'm ultimately an anarchist. I want to see the state. I mean, the state doesn't have anything to give us without taking it first. So it's like
Mhm.
that just basically ensures additional taxes. But we're already being taxed to death, and
Right,
most of it doesn't go towards any of these good ideas you might present.
right.
It's ultimately going to be grafted upon and lifted by the corporate interests that are in bed with the government or the politicians themselves half the time. So I'll grant
What
you though,
what
like
what do we
if
do then though? Because I mean, either because we're I don't
I think you have to remove the incentive structure. You have to remove the incentive.
entirely though.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remove the incentive structure of we're not going to give you government checks. Like you have to remove the welfare state,
Okay,
and then it requires. I mean, this is a much harder fix. Like I would say that what you're prescribing is a band-aid, whereas I'm trying to give like an
right.
actual like get to the bottom of it, get the bullet out of the wound type of deal, and like put stitches on it. It's a
Yeah,
much more painful experience, but I think it's ultimately the best thing for the patient is to say, this is the reason that we've gotten here is because these enormous state programs have fucked up our incentive, our way of like viewing the world, and
totally.
far too few people are taking responsibility for themselves. Everybody thinks that they should be taken care of by the state, and like that is really not what America was founded on. It was supposed to be like, we are here to be free and to strive and succeed based off of our merit, and if we fall flat, that's on us. And
Right,
that's not who we are anymore. At least a huge percentage of our population doesn't feel that anymore. And I'm very concerned about the trajectory of things, because I think that we're modeling our government more and more after the CCP in China. And I
right.
feel like if we continue to just try and tinker around the edges, and no, we let's have a
More programs, more and more
yeah,
taxes.
let's have financial incentive to get someone to be a good father. It's like, nah, man, we have to find a better fix than that. That's just my read of it. But
I think
I
that's a good read of it. I'm fascinated by it, and I think that's a really good point. I'm at some point. I don't think it's realistic to say that it's going to be total anarchy like Michael Malice wants or whatever,
right.
right? Though I think he's absolutely brilliant, and I struggle to find anything I even disagree with him on. He's awesome, but I I'm just trying to think of like what can actually happen that we could vote in and change that's not going to cause catastrophic, you know,
Right. Yeah, well, I think that the
effects.
truth is that once the system is so sick, the only remedy is immense pain. And because we are not the type that wants to take on the short-term pain to alleviate the long-term ailment, um, it's very unlikely that we will. And I think that that's why empires fall
Right,
usually, is that people are just they're going to kick the can as long as possible. They're going to continue to apply band-aids as opposed to like holistic treatment. And I think that's probably why we'll end up bankrupt and have a
print,
full.
print trillions of dollars a year more all the time,
Exactly.
constantly.
Exactly. And that's why empires oftentimes end in a hyperinflationary death spiral because the government is a reflection of the voting populace. The voting populace is a product of their governance, but ultimately neither side of that wants to take a couple of hard years
Right.
to alleviate the issue that's going to be catastrophic for decades if we don't. So I think that's probably where we're headed. Sadly, I know it
Totally
makes me sound like a doomer, but I feel like I'm just being realistic. That's probably what's going to happen.
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm a little more white pilly, a little more optimistic. I don't know how it's going to happen, though, to be fair, but I do believe, especially on this transgender stuff, I think it's trending
Oh
in the
yeah.
right way. You look at What is a Woman and Matt Walsh and all these people.
Right.
I think it's clear that we're trending that way. And I think that's really great as far as civilizationally and over taxes and over printing of money.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely doesn't look good.
No, I actually I agree with you entirely. I think that there's way more reason to be hopeful that there might be some semblance of sanity that comes back to us when it comes to, hey, maybe we shouldn't be permanently altering children. Like
Right.
that seems like an idea that we should all be able to get on board with. So
Yeah.
far, we haven't been able, but I think we might. As far as us stopping printing money and stop debasing our currency and burying ourselves in debt, I don't think that that's a trend that's going to change unless someone from my camp gets elected, which I don't see happening. So, yeah, man, what a crazy story. So is your son happy, healthy, everything good for
Yeah,
now?
he's totally healthy, happy, strong little boy. He's
Awesome, man.
absolutely amazing. He loves everything that I would wish he would love. He just likes everything that I find cool. It's unbelievable.
What's his do you guys play sports together? I mean, he's so
Oh,
young. I don't even know if you can
no,
do
he's
that.
totally. He can do the monkey bars already. I mean, he loves hockey, wrestling, football, baseball, lacrosse.
Love it.
He plays I play music, I write songs, he does some guitar and piano, he'll sing my songs or just songs I like even.
Oh,
You'll
that's
hear 'em.
adorable.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, he's remarkable in every way.
Well, I'm uh I'm appreciative of fathers like you that are willing to fight, because a lot of dads do walk away just because it's such a nightmare to
Right?
go through the court system and have this fight.
To be
So
their kid's uncle once a week or once a month.
right,
So,
exactly.
I mean, I think that's something we could work on for sure is
Yeah.
the court system being more fair.
Oh God, I wish, man. And it's just it's so miserable. I mean, the court system is miserable, period. But then when your child's well-being hangs in the balance,
Right.
I can't even fathom that level of torture, because I just hate interacting with the government, period. And then if I had to do that to actually possess my own child, it's like I can't even imagine. I'm sure a lot of dads go completely crazy
For
going
sure.
through it. How have you weathered this storm? I'm sure it's been taxing.
It's very hard. I mean, I think being brave about this story with Daily Wire is unbelievable, and I'm so thankful to them
Hell yeah.
and people like you helping me out. But I exercise every day, listen to music, just try
Yeah,
to do things that keep you on the right path. Generally, eat healthy and stuff like that, so that
for
I at
sure.
least have the best shot at being in the best state of mind that I can be for all of it. You just have to accept the responsibility. This is what it is. Like Jordan Peterson would say,
Right.
I'm ready for it. I'm just gonna be a man and just take it on. And that's
Yep.
what I've been doing. And I'm gonna continue to do for my son.
Love it, man. Make your bed and then
Yep.
and then step two. Oh
Right.
man. Yeah, I'm really glad that you at least got half custody, and I hope that you guys can co-parent in a way that is ultimately to the ultimate benefit of your child. It's the most important duty, in my opinion, that we are ever offered on this earth. So
Absolutely.
you seem like a great dad, and I really do hope that the hardest part of this story is behind you and not in front of you.
I hope so too. And I think thank you. And that's a great word you use, duty. We were talking about different problems we have in society. I think men or people generally need to have more of a sense of duty
Yeah,
about doing the right thing. I think we're lacking that.
I
I
agree,
think
man.
that's really important.
That's one thing that actually I'll ask you about that before we get out of here. Vivek Ramaswamy, um, I'm scheduling with him to have him on the show, and
Nice.
he's floated this idea of mandatory duty of some sort, not necessarily like enlistment as like the Israelis do,
Right.
but some sort of civil duty. And I'm personally, as you know, I've already said I'm an anarchist. I don't want the state to be able to obligate me to do anything, pay taxes or anything. But I, it is an interesting idea just simply because, I mean, this is again, what I would describe as a band-aid. Like we have a root cultural problem, and I don't think that you can mandate that from the state to go like, you need to love your country again and you need to do this.
Right.
It's like that's not how it works. Like we loved our country because our country treated us right. And now our country doesn't because they locked us in our homes for 2 years. So like y'all have to actually, clean up your own you have to make your own bed. and then we won't be so anti-American moving forward. But
Can
anyways,
you
what
think of any solutions for some of these things that aren't band-aids that also don't involve the entire collapse of the country? Because you keep saying that, but I mean, what's like the
no,
what's a way we could like do it without such devastation or whatever you
well,
want?
I don't think that
And I know you don't want like bad things to happen.
No, of course,
I'm just
of course.
curious, like what
I
could
think
we do? Maybe.
yeah, the truth is that there is no silver bullet. There is no easy fix to any of this because it's decades, if not centuries long, like degradation of civilization.
Right.
In my estimation, it largely begins in 1913 with the founding of the Federal Reserve and the
Okay.
beginning of our debt cycle. I think ultimately that's the reason that we migrated away from a single income earner to a dual income earning household where you didn't have one of the parents that was looking after the children. I think that that's a product of inflation largely. And then obviously you have globalism that also plays a role in that in terms of like opening up more competition for labor, which diminishes, eh, pay income.
Do you
So
think
it,
getting rid of the Fed could be a solution then, or the
oh
IRS
yeah.
and IRS and Fed or something?
Oh, of course. Yeah, that would be
Okay, I think so too.
enormously. Yeah, that'd be enormously positive. But that wouldn't be without pain. I mean, there
Of
would
course.
be a very, very steep recession for a few years, no doubt. So, I don't think that like, well, I have some answers. They're just politically untenable. You're not going to have the people vote to be like, hey, do you want to be poor for the next 2 years? Because like that's
Right.
going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's what we need to do. So like you basically have to have just such a popular figure. Like Donald Trump is actually the type of guy that could have done something like this because he had such a cult following behind him
Right.
that he could have just been like, hey, I'm going to do some things that you probably think are crazy, but it's actually to our benefit and it's going to be hard, but we'll get through it. Like you need real leadership I guess is what I'm saying. And I think to an extent, Vivek has that. Like, I think he's capable of that, but I do not think that mandating that the government owns me for 2 years of my life in terms of, I don't know, whatever, picking up trash along the side of a highway or something. Like, I don't know what his plan is exactly, but I just don't think that that's how I don't think that's how you reinstill patriotism by
Right.
mandating someone be a ward of the state for a couple years. So I don't know.
I think I lean towards with you on that one. That's
Yeah.
like where I'll draw the line. Like that's too much government forcing
Yeah.
us to do things. It's really a hard line to draw. Like when is it okay and when is it not?
Well, I mean, but
Generally, you want them to have as little as power as possible, but
right.
all we have is like more and more. I mean, we new laws all the time. We don't delete the old ones. We just keep making more. Keep
Oh,
making more.
I think
Could we
that's a
delete
great
the old ones?
constitutional amendment is that every law that gets passed, you have to
Exactly.
abolish two.
That'd be wonderful.
I think that's great. So I'm willing to go higher, 10, 20. But I think that would be a reasonable constitutional amendment or something like that to diminish the power of the state because it's just getting to be so extravagant. And I mean the real, just to be, and I'll tell Vivek this when I have him on. My real concern is like, so say Vivek's in there and they implement that and the American people accept it, they acquiesce to these what I think are very overbearing demands that you have 2 years of your young adult life that are in some way dedicated to the state. Okay, well then what if Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton is the president in 2028 and she wants to have World War III? Do you think that they're not going to use that as a instant mechanism for a new draft?
Well, they're going to draft us anyway at that point. But
True.
I agree though.
Yeah, I mean, it just
Not
puts us
good.
like one step closer, and I'm like,
Right.
I want 0 steps closer to World War III. Like,
Me too.
no, thank you. So yeah, it's I don't know. It's an interesting time, but
It is.
I do think that like more and more people are starting to I hate when people say this, but wake up. Like
Right.
I feel like they are like there's
They are. No, I know so many people. It's so true. People are waking up all over. Like I said, Democrats, everyone are
right.
waking up. It's
When are the Democrats going to start speaking out? I mean, I know there's some, Kim Iverson and a handful of others come to mind, but like when are they going to say, okay, yeah, this is definitely too far. Like, we are actually going to risk being ostracized from our
Right.
social network to speak out.
Well, the problem is there's a huge divide between Democrats, like people like you and me, versus the elected officials. Now, the elected officials
Right.
appear, in my estimation, to be pretty radically to the left, not on par with what their voters believe at all.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of a big line there, and I think that's kind of the problem.
I agree. I think that's a really complicated issue that I don't know if we have time to.
Did you see the vote? All the Democrats voted no on banning men from women's sports, just to get in the transgender thing again. Like we were saying, how this is all so crazy. It's like hard to even believe. Like that's another example, or prisons are a good example too. If you've seen that,
Yeah,
it's
man.
like, how are we even debating that someone can cheat and steal women's scholarships and trophies and go into prisons with women? I mean, it's like, it's really
Well,
not
it's
okay.
not just unfair. It's actually dangerous. I think that's the thing that like gets overlooked a lot is
Totally.
that, and I don't just mean like, oh, you could have some crazy dude who says he's a chick and then he goes in there and he's a rapist or something. I'm saying
Yeah.
like there's Fallon Fox, like there's a
Yep.
biological male who's fighting women. Now, granted, I think that it is at least honorable that she has declared that she is formerly he, and like they, at least that when they sign the contract, they know.
Tell
But
them. Yeah.
yeah, but that's dangerous, dude. Like you have a biological male, frame. Imagine either of us hitting a woman. Like it's horrifying. It's a horrifying thought. And like, no matter if they're professional fighters or not, I'm just a much bigger human being. Like
Right.
I'm just built different. So I really think that you're going to have instances of people getting, physically like
Well,
really.
we are. Fallon Fox fractured that chick's skull.
Oh, that's right.
Mistaken, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, but I mean, like we could have some permanent damage that happens, not just like short-term severe injuries.
Right.
Oh man, yeah. It just feels like the wheels have fallen off our brains.
They have.
like people are just not thinking rationally. The fact that Joe Rogan has had to spend like the last 5 years of his life speaking out against this type of insanity,
Right.
because he's like, look, I have watched more MMA fights than any human being on the face of the planet. Trust me when I tell you, a low-level man in the UFC mops the floor with the champion, in any women's division ever.
Right.
Like that's just how it is, and it's just reality.
Yeah.
So I think you're right though that like Matt Walsh, that documentary, has woken a ton of people up, and I think that a lot more as people like start to realize that this is a much more pervasive issue as opposed to these like one-off anecdotes. Like
Right.
this is a real systemic issue where you have hundreds and thousands of teachers, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds and thousands, like thousands of teachers that are really pushing a progressive sexual ideology on young, impressionable children that have no idea how dangerous it can be for them moving forward. And I mean, I would say you should abolish public schools, but you would say just ban it in the curriculum, I'd imagine.
I don't particularly want to put my son in public school, so I'm not.
There you go.
I'm not against you on that. I mean,
hey, we found common ground. All right, man. Well, I know you're taking in funds for future legal battles. Do you have any info that you could leave with my audience on that?
I have a Give, Send, Go set up for my attorney's fees.
Yeah, what's that called? Or what's the info?
That's a good question. It's Give, Send, Go. If you just look up Harrison Tinsley, Give, Send, Go, it'll come right up. All my social media is Harrison Tinsley on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all that. Come right up, and I'll have that link on there as well.
Okay, it's HARRISONTINSLEY. Just want to make sure people get the spelling right so they don't send money to the wrong person. For those that are watching, as always, if you guys want to support my work, go to libertylockdown.locals.com. And if you want to, you can actually text me on my actual cell phone on Converso. It's the best privacy messaging app out there. That's CONVERSO. Just search for it in the Google or Apple download stores, and my phone number is 555-175-8394. Harrison, is there anything else you'd like to leave with my audience before we hop out of here?
I just want everyone to be brave, stand up for what you believe in.
Yep. Stop biting your tongues. Stop being bitches. All right.
Exactly.
Thanks, Harrison. I really, seriously, man, like the fight that you've been through, I watched my dad go through a similar thing with one of my siblings, and I know that it takes a toll. So I'm appreciative not only that you fought then, but you're continuing to speak out now, because I think it'll lend a lot of support to a lot of other fathers that probably feel as if their plight is being ignored. So
Right.
I hope this inspires more and more parents and more fathers or mothers to do the right thing on the behalf of their children. So
Me too. I'll do
my
anything.
my hat's off to you, brother.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. We're out of here. Peace.
See ya.